The water shimmered under the pale glow of the moon, a silver mirror that hid as much as it revealed. Michaela's bare feet pressed against the smooth stones at the edge of the creek, the cold biting at her skin. But she barely noticed. She was lost in the rhythm of the water, letting it cascade over her arms and shoulders, tracing the curves of her body that she had spent so long sculpting with work, travel, and solitude. The world around her was silent, save for the whisper of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Yet she felt the prickle of unease that always came when darkness crept too close. She paused, water dripping from her long braids, and looked up at the tree line. Something moved. No, someone moved. But she told herself it was a shadow, a trick of the moonlight. Michaela's hands tightened around the edge of the creek as her heart began to race. She had lived her life learning to trust her instincts, to survive without reliance on anyone. And yet, a part of her, small, foolish, reckless, wanted to stay rooted, to see. Nokomis had been watching from the tree line, silent and still as the stone beneath his feet. He had seen many things in his years, storms that could tear the canyon apart, wolves that could strike in the blink of an eye, rival warriors who underestimated him. Yet this lone woman bathing under the moonlight, held him in a quiet, dangerous fascination. He knew he should leave, should turn and disappear into the night as any careful hunter would. But something about her presence, the way she moved, unaware yet commanding, anchored him to the spot. Michaela shivered and drew the skirt of her flowing garment tighter around her waist. She tried to focus on the cold, the moon, the water, anything but the feeling that she was being watched. Her muscles tensed. She had been alone in the canyon for weeks, sending scouts and hunters away before they could discover her path. She was supposed to be safe. She was supposed to be unseen. Nokomis stepped lightly on a fallen branch, his moccasins making barely a whisper against the earth. The sound echoed, small but distinct, and Michaela's eyes darted toward the trees again. This time, she saw him, or thought she did. A shadow among shadows, tall and solid, darker than the night itself. She pulled herself out of the creek, water dripping from her long, dark braids, her body glistening under the moonlight. Her toned muscles flexed as she moved with practiced grace, shaking off droplets and tugging at her loose woven top to cling to her form. She was aware of his gaze, though she could not see him fully. Her pulse quickened, but not with fear. Not yet. Curiosity mingled with the caution, sharp and biting. Nokomis did not speak. He did not move closer. He simply watched her, a silhouette against the forest. The only evidence of his presence the subtle shifting of shadows beneath the trees. He knew the woman was dangerous, fierce, clever, independent. But the moonlight revealed something else. Her strength, her skill, her quiet defiance. She was not the fragile figure of a village girl, nor the timid daughter of traders. She was a force of nature, wild and unyielding. Michaela finally spoke, her voice low, cautious, almost a whisper. "Who's there?" Her words did not tremble with fear. They were steady, commanding in their simplicity, a challenge wrapped in silk and determination. Still, Nokomis did not respond. He had no need to. His presence was enough. A predator of the night, he understood the power of silence. It kept people honest. It kept them sharp. And sometimes it spoke louder than any words could. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Michaela's body remained tense, but she kept her gaze on the darkened forest. Her mind raced. Stranger? Enemy? Hunter? Warrior? She did not know, and she hated not knowing. Yet something in the stillness, in the way the shadows clung to the edges of the trees, told her she was not entirely in danger. Not yet. Nokomis' eyes, dark and unreadable, traced the lines of her body, memorizing the fluid motion of her movements, the way she balanced strength with grace. She was a challenge, yes, but a challenge he could not ignore. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine, of earth, of water, and with it, the faintest trace of sweat, the subtle warmth of life, of vitality. A sudden rustle of leaves made Michaela spin, her arms raised instinctively. Her hands brushed the cold stone beneath the creek, steadying her, grounding herself. The man had moved, or had he? Her gaze found the shadow again, and it seemed closer. Closer, but still distant, like a threat barely tangible, like a question without an answer. "Show yourself." Her voice, firmer now, cut through the night air. There was authority in her tone, but also the spark of something else. Fascination. A small part of her wanted him to respond, to step into the moonlight and prove he was flesh and bone, not merely a specter haunting the night. Nokomis remained silent. And then, finally, he stepped into the clearing, just enough for the moonlight to catch the lines of his face, the curve of his shoulders, the strength in his arms. He did not smile. He did not speak. He merely stood, a solid figure against the soft glow of the creek. Michaela's breath hitched slightly, though she forced herself to remain composed. His presence was commanding, undeniable, yet he gave nothing away. No threat, no reassurance, no clue to his intent. She hated that he could affect her without a single word. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other, two predators testing the boundaries of a shared space. Neither moved closer, neither backed away, and yet the tension was palpable, thick as the night air, mingling with the scent of wet earth and river stone. Finally, Nokomi spoke. His voice was low, controlled, almost reverent. "The water is cold." Michaela blinked, momentarily startled. She had expected a challenge, a warning, or even nothing at all. Instead, a statement so simple, so mundane, yet delivered with authority and weight, made her pause. She nodded, acknowledging it, but did not reply. Words would give him too much power, she reminded herself. He took a step back, fading again into the shadows, leaving only the faint echo of his presence. Michaela remained where she was, the water running over her hands, her mind spinning with questions she could not yet answer. Who was he? Why had he come here? And most importantly, what had he seen in her? What had he known before she even realized he was there? The night stretched on. The moon climbed higher, painting the creek with silver light. Michaela finished her bath in silence, her thoughts tangled with the shadow of the man who had appeared and vanished like a dream. Her muscles ached pleasantly, her skin glowed under the cool night air, and her heart carried the faint, unfamiliar thrum of intrigue. And somewhere in the darkness, Nokomis watched, memorizing, calculating, holding his distance. He would not speak again tonight, not fully. Yet he had marked her, just as she had marked him. Two souls passing like comets through the night sky, near enough to sense the heat, but far enough apart to preserve the mystery. This was only the beginning. The dawn crept slowly over the horizon, pale light bleeding across the canyon walls. Michaela stood on a ridge, the wind tugging at her long, dark braids, her skirt flowing like liquid around her toned legs. She had spent the night in restless thought, replaying the shadow she had glimpsed by the creek over and over, questioning her instincts, her safety, and the strange pull she could not yet name. She had hoped the morning would bring clarity. Instead, it brought the realization that she had been observed, and not just casually. The presence she had felt in the night lingered, a weight in her chest, and a prickle along her spine that told her Nokomis was no ordinary wanderer. He was deliberate, silent, and patient, the kind of hunter who would wait until his prey revealed everything before making a move. Michaela began her daily routines, gathering herbs, checking traps, and tending to the small fire she kept hidden from the main paths. Her movements were precise, controlled, each motion trained and practiced. Yet, beneath that careful exterior, her mind kept circling back to the man in the shadows. Who was he? Why had he come? And why had he not left her alone, not yet? Meanwhile, Nokomis tracked her at a distance, moving with the quiet grace of a shadow. He did not follow her too closely. No, he respected the unspoken boundary she seemed to maintain, but his presence remained just beyond the line of sight. He watched her strength, the way her muscles flexed under the soft weave of her clothing, the sharp intelligence that guided her hands as she worked. She was not like other women he had seen, not like the gentle daughters of the villages. She was her own force, and he would have to be careful, very careful, if he wanted to understand her without breaking her spirit. Michaela paused on the ridge, her keen eyes scanning the canyon below. Movement caught her attention, subtle, almost imperceptible. A figure, tall and solid, appeared near the river bend. Her heart rate increased, but she forced herself to remain calm. She did not run. She did not call out. Instead, she allowed herself to observe, matching shadow with shadow, her instincts sharp. Nokomis remained at a safe distance, hidden by the ridges and scattered trees. He had no intention of revealing himself fully yet. She must earn his trust, or perhaps he hers, though he did not yet admit it. He studied her form, noting the way her skirt clung to her figure when the wind shifted, the strength in her arms as she lifted water from the river, the deliberate care in her movements. She was not naive. She was not frightened. She was aware, and that awareness, that spark of independence, was what drew him more than any physical beauty could. Hours passed. Michaela moved through the land with the ease of someone deeply connected to it. She hunted small game, checked the traps she had set the night before, and returned to her hidden fire pit, laying out a simple meal of roasted roots and dried meat. Even as she worked, she felt the lingering presence of the man who had invaded her solitude, the ghost of his gaze brushing against her skin like a whispered warning. Nokomis watched her settle at the fire from a distance, the flickering flames illuminating the canyon walls. He could see her strength, her independence, and the sharp mind that guided her movements. She did not need him, and that was exactly why he could not leave. He wanted to know her, to understand the force that she was, without frightening her away. As night approached again, Michaela found herself drawn to the same creek, the one where she had bathed under the moonlight days before. She stepped carefully along the rocks, the water cool beneath her moccasins, the moon climbing slowly to its zenith. Her muscles remembered the feel of the water, the way it traced her form, and she allowed herself a moment of solace, a brief respite from the constant tension of survival. Nokomis observed from a higher ridge, the moonlight catching the hard lines of his face and the curve of his shoulders. He did not move closer, not yet. The night demanded patience. The woman's movements, strong yet graceful, her focus sharp yet subtly aware, fascinated him. She was an enigma, a challenge and a danger all in one. And though he had not spoken a word beyond the first night, he understood more about her in silence than many could understand in a lifetime of conversation. Michaela paused in the water, letting it cascade over her shoulders, her braids slicked with moisture. She felt eyes on her again, subtle yet undeniable, and her heart raced, not with fear, but with the thrill of recognition. Someone was near, watching, calculating, holding back. She could sense it in the air, in the quiet shifts of the night, in the way the wind carried the faint scent of smoke and earth. The night stretched, and the tension between them deepened, unspoken and unresolved. Neither made a move, neither spoke. And yet, in that silence, a connection began to form. Not of words or gestures, but of mutual recognition, of understanding each other's strength, of acknowledging the presence of someone who might one day change the course of their solitary lives. Nokomis finally turned away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Michaela alone with the moonlit creek. Her pulse slowed, but the echo of his presence remained, a reminder that the world was larger than her solitude, and that someone, silent and watchful, had entered it and refused to leave entirely. The fire of curiosity had been lit, small and careful, yet burning with a heat that neither of them could yet name. And in the quiet, under the moonlight, the canyon held its breath, waiting for the next step in a dance neither of them fully understood, but both were already compelled to follow. The canyon breathed in silence, a low hum carried by the wind through jagged cliffs and twisted juniper. Michaela perched on a boulder near the river, her skirt pulled up slightly to let her feet rest in the cool water. Dawn had long passed, leaving the world bathed in the stark, golden light of mid-morning, but she felt none of the warmth. Her mind, always alert, could not settle. The memory of him lingered. Nokomis, the silent shadow, the watcher in the night, had not left her thoughts. Every movement, every sound in the forest reminded her of him. The snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a hawk. She knew the canyon better than anyone, yet his presence made her feel exposed, as if she were no longer the sole master of her own world. She adjusted her braids, running her fingers through the wet strands, her toned arms flexing, and surveyed the river's surface. The water rippled under the sunlight, catching the folds of her skirt and revealing the strength in her legs and torso. She hated the awareness of being seen, but she could not deny the pull it had on her. Her instincts screamed caution, yet her curiosity demanded understanding. Nokomis moved through the canyon silently, his footsteps soundless over the rocky terrain. He had watched her rise with the sun, seen the precision of her daily rituals, the care with which she handled her traps and her fire. Each movement told him more about her than words ever could. She was self-sufficient, disciplined, and yet alive in ways he had not expected. There was a rhythm to her strength, a cadence that matched the land itself. The river bent sharply near a fallen tree, and Michaela crouched, examining a small fish she had caught in the shallow water. Her muscles flexed naturally as she held it in her hands, and for a fleeting moment, she imagined someone else standing across from her, sharing the quiet work of survival. The thought startled her. She shook her head and returned to her task. She would not entertain such ideas. Not yet. From the ridge above, Nokomis watched. His shadow stretched long over the rocks, a subtle reminder that he was there, and yet careful enough not to intrude. He admired her focus, her strength, the way the sunlight glinted off her skin and braided hair. She was unaware of his gaze, yet he knew it had an effect. That knowledge was intoxicating, but he did not act on it. Patience, he reminded himself. The woman could not be rushed. Michaela's movements were precise, each action intentional, but her mind wandered back to the night she had first seen him. The memory of his dark silhouette against the moonlit creek made her pulse quicken. She had not feared him. Strangely, she had felt a flicker of something else. Intrigue? Challenge? She could not name it. All she knew was that she had been unsettled by his presence, and yet, against her better judgment, had found herself wanting to know more. As she straightened, brushing water from her arms, a sudden rustle in the underbrush froze her in place. Her hands instinctively gripped a nearby branch, her body tensing. She scanned the trees, her sharp eyes catching the faint movement of a shadow slipping between trunks. Her breath caught, not with fear, but with the thrill of recognition. He had returned. Nokomis did not approach openly. Instead, he moved with careful precision, keeping just enough distance that she would notice him without feeling directly threatened. He was studying her, as he always had, noting the way her muscles flexed, the subtle sway of her skirt as she adjusted her stance, the tension in her shoulders that betrayed her alertness. She was more than capable of defending herself, and that was what intrigued him most. Michaela narrowed her eyes, trying to discern the figure among the trees. Her instincts were sharp. She could tell he was near, measuring, waiting, yet she could not see him clearly, and the uncertainty gnawed at her, pulling her attention like a magnet. She hated the vulnerability it caused, yet a small, stubborn part of her welcomed it. The sun climbed higher, filtering through the canopy and casting dappled shadows across the ground. Michaela resumed her work by the river, careful not to glance too often toward the ridge. Still, the awareness of being watched lingered, wrapping around her like a second skin. She could feel him there, the silent observer, the patient hunter. And though she would not admit it, it made her pulse quicken with a mixture of irritation and fascination. Nokomis remained, shadow among shadows, his eyes tracing her every movement. He had learned much about her already, her precision, her strength, her unyielding independence. And yet, he knew that nothing he had seen could prepare him for the depth of her will, the fierceness of her solitude. She was not a woman to be tamed, and that was precisely why he could not turn away. The canyon held its breath as the day wore on, sun climbing toward its zenith, birds calling above, and the river whispering its secrets. Michaela paused at the water's edge, letting the sunlight warm her damp skin. Muscles relaxed for the first time since dawn, yet her eyes never left the ridge. She sensed him, knew he was there, and a flicker of frustration crossed her features. How dare he intrude on her solitude? And yet, why did she find herself longing for some trace of him, some confirmation of the shadow that haunted her morning? The tension between them remained unbroken, silent and taut. Nokomis moved with care, never stepping too close, never revealing more than necessary. And Michaela, while aware of him, maintained her distance, her composure, yet could not fully shake the sensation of being drawn into something larger than herself. Night approached again, painting the canyon with long shadows and silver light. Michaela finally rose, brushing her skirt against the rocks, muscles flexing with ease, and began the climb back toward her hidden dwelling. The air was thick with expectation, with the unspoken acknowledgement of two forces circling one another. And as she disappeared into the canyon's folds, Nokomis remained on the ridge, silent and watchful. He had not moved closer, had not spoken, yet his gaze followed her, memorizing the strength, the grace, the independence that made her both untouchable and irresistible. The slow burn continued, tension unbroken, trust untested, desire unspoken, and in the quiet wilderness of the Apache lands, two souls had found each other, not through words or gestures, but through the careful, deliberate dance of patience, observation, and unacknowledged fascination. This was still only the beginning. The sun had begun its descent, painting the canyon walls with streaks of crimson and gold. Michaela moved with deliberate care along the winding path that led through the lower cliffs, her skirt brushing against jagged stones, her moccasins silent on the earth. She had spent the day checking traps and gathering herbs, yet a part of her remained restless, her mind replaying the subtle shadow she had sensed earlier. She paused near a shallow clearing, where a grove of trees provided both cover and vantage. Her hands rested lightly on a sturdy branch, muscles flexing under the soft weave of her top as she surveyed her surroundings. Something had shifted in the day. The air was heavier, charged with a tension she could not yet name. She knew she was being watched. From above, Nokomis crouched on a rocky ledge, the afternoon light casting harsh shadows across his strong frame. His dark hair fell in a loose braid, and the muscles of his arms and torso were taut, ready to spring into action if needed. Unlike before, he allowed himself a moment of observation, studying Michaela not just as a presence in the wilderness, but as a living, breathing challenge. She was aware of him now. He could feel it in the subtle tension of her body, the way her posture shifted when she sensed a presence, but she did not yet know him. Michaela took a careful step forward, scanning the clearing, her gaze sharp. The wind rustled the trees, and for the first time, she thought she caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow slipping between two trunks, deliberate and controlled. Her breath quickened, but she refused to show fear. She had lived alone long enough to trust her instincts, yet this presence, silent, measured, was unlike anything she had encountered. Nokomis allowed the shadow to linger just out of sight, testing her awareness. He noted how she held herself, strong yet restrained, her every motion precise. She was beautiful in a way that demanded attention, yet it was her strength and independence that captivated him. Not since he had been a young warrior had he encountered someone whose presence alone could command such careful respect. Michaela's eyes narrowed, scanning for movement again. The scent of pine and earth mixed with something faintly smoky, carried on the breeze. She felt the subtle brush of being observed, and while she did not see him clearly, she knew he was near. Her pulse raced, not with fear, but with a spark of challenge. She would not be intimidated. She would not falter. The clearing shifted as a gust of wind passed through, rustling leaves and branches. Michaela froze for a heartbeat, then resumed her careful step forward. Her toned arms flexed as she adjusted her skirt, her braid swinging lightly against her back. She sensed the observer again, closer now, more deliberate, and a thrill ran through her. Not fear, but excitement, the kind that came from knowing you were not alone in your strength, that someone else could recognize it without words. Nokomis remained silent, hidden above. He allowed himself the rare indulgence of admiration. The woman before him was untamed, a force shaped by solitude and skill. And yet, she moved with a grace that made his pulse quicken, despite the discipline he had trained into himself over years of hunting and survival. He was drawn to her, not in the way one desires conquest, but in the way one recognizes a kindred spirit, even when unspoken, unseen, and unacknowledged. The canyon air thickened as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched across the clearing. Michaela paused once more, surveying the trees and rocks, her muscles relaxed yet alert. She had begun to anticipate the presence she could not see, to accept it as part of her environment. The silent watcher had become a known factor, a puzzle she could not yet solve. Nokomi's shifted slightly, the rock under his hands cool against his skin, his shadow merging with the craggy cliff. He was patient, knowing the dance was just beginning. He would not force interaction. He would not rush what the canyon and the moonlight had begun. Instead, he observed, memorized, and waited. Each movement of hers teaching him more about the woman who had captured his focus without a single word exchanged. As the sky darkened into twilight, Michaela finally moved toward her hidden shelter, leaving the clearing empty. Yet the energy of the encounter lingered. She could feel it, an unspoken acknowledgement of another presence, silent but persistent. The canyon held its breath, the wind whispering secrets through the trees, as two solitary beings traced the edge of connection, circling closer without knowing when or if they would ever meet fully. The night descended, cool and silvered, wrapping the canyon in quiet tension. Nokomis remained, crouched above, memorizing the final movements of the day, imprinting the image of her strong, lithe form in his mind. The slow burn continued, subtle, deliberate, undeniable. Neither had spoken, neither had revealed their intent, and yet both were aware of the growing pull that neither wanted to acknowledge aloud. This was no longer simply observation. It was fascination, attention, and the spark of something neither dared to name. The canyon, the moon, and the earth itself seemed to conspire to hold them in suspense. Two forces caught between distance and closeness, solitude and recognition. For the first time, Michaela allowed herself to wonder, briefly, dangerously, if she was not entirely alone. And somewhere above, hidden in shadow, Nokomis allowed himself a flicker of hope that this dance, this careful watch, was only the beginning of something far greater than either of them yet understood. The canyon was quiet, the only sound the soft murmur of the river curling around rocks and the occasional rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Michaela moved carefully, her bare arms brushing against the tips of low-hanging branches, her moccasins gripping the uneven earth as she descended toward the creek. She had learned every twist and turn of this canyon, every hidden nook where danger might hide. But tonight, the familiar paths felt charged, as if the air itself held a secret. She sensed him before she saw him, a shadow shifting with deliberate grace along the ridge above, muscles tensed, dark braid catching the last rays of the setting sun. Her pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm, controlled. She had trained herself to react to threat with precision, and she would not betray any vulnerability now. Nokomis had not expected this. The woman's awareness was remarkable, every movement calculated yet fluid, a dance that demanded attention. He admired her strength silently, letting her confidence and skill speak louder than any words could. And yet, for the first time since he had begun following her, he felt the tension in his chest tighten, not with impatience, but with the pull of desire he refused to name. As Michaela crouched near the water's edge, testing the river's flow with a handful of stones, a branch snapped behind her. She spun, muscles flexing, ready to strike with whatever was at hand. Nokomis froze in the shadow of the trees, holding his ground, muscles coiled like a spring. He had made no sound, yet she had noticed. That subtle recognition made him both proud and unnervingly aware of the connection forming between them. Unspoken and raw. "Show yourself," Michaela demanded, her voice low and steady, carrying over the water with an authority that brooked no defiance. Nokomis stepped out of the shadows slowly, deliberately, letting the light fall across the hard planes of his chest and the curve of his shoulders. He did not rush, did not speak. His eyes held her gaze, calculating, assessing, acknowledging. Michaela's pulse thumped in her chest as she measured him in return. She could see the muscles flex under his tunic, the dark braid falling over one shoulder, the way he moved with controlled power. She hated the effect he had on her, yet she could not look away. For long moments, neither spoke. The canyon seemed to shrink around them, the river's murmur fading into the background, leaving only the electric tension between two forces that refused to yield. Michaela's toned arms flexed as she adjusted her stance, ready for anything, but not entirely expecting what came next. Nokomis finally spoke, his voice low and measured, almost reverent. "The river is swift tonight." It was a simple observation, yet it carried weight. Michaela's eyes narrowed, scanning him carefully. He had not threatened her. He had not made a move. Yet the awareness of him standing so close, muscles coiled, presence dominating the space, ignited a thrill she could not suppress. She shifted her weight subtly, ready to retreat if necessary. But something inside her, a spark she could not name, kept her rooted. The sun dipped further, spilling molten gold across the water, reflecting off Michaela's wet hair, highlighting the toned curve of her figure. She tried to focus on her instincts, to remind herself that she was alone in this land and that intruders were dangerous. But his presence distracted her. The canyon was hers, yet he had entered it without asking, and she could not deny the magnetic pull it had created. Nokomi stepped closer, but not too close. Every inch he gained was deliberate, testing the boundaries of her awareness, letting her see that he meant no immediate harm. His dark eyes scanned her form, noting every flex of her muscles, every subtle sway of her skirt as she shifted. He did not reach out, did not touch, yet the space between them felt charged, electric with anticipation. Michaela exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She would not let him intimidate her, and yet, something deep within her chest throbbed at the nearness, at the shared understanding that passed between them in silence. They were two solitary warriors, circling one another, neither yielding, neither fully revealing the force of their desire. The evening deepened, the canyon now bathed in twilight, shadows stretching across the rocks and water. Nokomi's finally stopped, standing just beyond reach, letting the distance maintain the fragile tension between them. Michaela met his gaze, recognizing the same restraint, the same respect, the same unspoken acknowledgement of power. The night was theirs for a fleeting moment, a shared breath of understanding, of recognition, of quiet challenge. The slow burn that had begun under the moonlight now intensified, the air thick with possibility, danger, and unacknowledged longing. Neither had spoken words of admiration, of attraction, yet the unspoken language between them was undeniable. As Michaela finally turned away, retreating to the path that would lead her to her hidden shelter, she felt the weight of his gaze follow her. Nokomi's lingered in the shadows, muscles relaxed but alert, committing the image of her strength, grace, and independence to memory. The canyon exhaled around them, holding the tension like a living thing, waiting for the next step in a dance neither fully controlled, but both were compelled to continue. Tonight, they had crossed the first line. Not words, not touches, not confessions. Just the awareness that they existed in each other's space, and that presence alone was enough to ignite the slow, dangerous fire growing between them. And in the heart of the Apache lands, under the soft twilight of a canyon sky, the tension deepened, the slow burn continued, and the first sparks of something neither could yet name began to flare. Night had settled fully over the canyon, wrapping the cliffs, rocks, and river in a blanket of silver and deep indigo. Michaela moved cautiously along the riverbank, the water lapping softly against the stones beneath her moccasins. The day's tension had not eased. Instead, it had grown into a subtle, electric awareness that someone was nearby. She paused on a smooth rock, brushing her dark braid over one shoulder, muscles flexing as she leaned forward to inspect the water. The moonlight danced across her toned arms and legs, highlighting the strength she carried without effort. Her heart rate quickened, not in fear, but in anticipation. She knew he was close. She could feel it in the air, in the subtle rustle of leaves, in the faint, measured exhalation of wind. Nokomi's emerged from the shadows, careful and deliberate, stepping onto the riverbank with the quiet grace of a predator accustomed to patience. He did not approach too quickly, but neither did he stay hidden. The space between them was small, charged with tension and unspoken understanding. His tunic clung to the lines of his muscles, his braid falling across his shoulder, the firelight, or in this case, moonlight, casting shadows across his form. Michaela's pulse throbbed as she met his gaze. No words were spoken, but each understood the other's strength and restraint. He was powerful, controlled, disciplined. And yet, the fact that he had come this close without intimidation or threat intrigued her. It was unlike anything she had experienced before. Someone who recognized her power without attempting to dominate it. The river moved between them, sparkling under the silvered moon, yet it did not divide them. It heightened the connection, the dangerous awareness that neither could ignore. Michaela shifted subtly, muscles flexing, testing boundaries. Nokomis mirrored her movements in silence, neither advancing too quickly, neither retreating, both aware of the tension simmering between them. For long moments, they simply observed one another. The canyon seemed to disappear, leaving only two solitary beings locked in a silent, deliberate dance. Michaela's toned figure was illuminated by the moonlight, her skirt brushing the water, her arms and legs taut with alertness and latent strength. Nokomis's eyes traced her form, memorizing, respecting, yet silently drawn toward her in a way he did not fully understand. She finally broke the silence. "Why are you here?" Her voice was calm, yet edged with curiosity and challenge. Nokomis tilted his head, considering. "Because I could not leave," he said simply. No embellishment, no explanation, just the stark, undeniable truth. Michaela's lips pressed together. She wanted to react, anger, irritation, suspicion, but she could not. Something about his presence, the quiet acknowledgement of her skill and independence, drew her in despite herself. The canyon's quiet seemed to amplify the tension between them, and for the first time, Michaela realized she was no longer indifferent to him. Nokomis stepped closer, but not intrusively. Every movement was measured, respectful, and yet the electricity in the air was undeniable. The moonlight caught the lines of his chest, the curve of his arms, and she could not help but notice. Her body responded in ways her mind refused to name, muscles tensing, pulse quickening, awareness sharpened. For a fleeting moment, the world held its breath. The river whispered softly. The canyon walls glowed silver, and two solitary figures faced one another in the suspended space between observation and action. Michaela and Nokomis, hunter and watcher, warrior and enigma, were closer than ever, yet the tension remained a delicate, dangerous thing. She took a subtle step back, testing him, seeing if he would follow. Nokomis did not. He let the space remain, acknowledging her autonomy even as the pull between them tightened. The slow burn that had begun months ago, through moonlit nights, careful observation and silent recognition, now flared with intensity. Desire, curiosity, and respect intermingled in a dangerous, unspoken cocktail. The night deepened, and Michaela finally turned away, retreating to the narrow path that would lead her to her shelter. Nokomis remained by the river, shadowed and still, memorizing her form, the sway of her skirt, the tension in her muscles. This encounter had shifted something fundamental. Distance had been closed, awareness sharpened, and neither could pretend indifference any longer. The canyon exhaled around them, holding the secret of their silent meeting. For the first time, both understood that the slow burn was no longer just observation. It was interaction, deliberate and electric. And as the moon climbed higher, casting silver across the water, the inevitability of what was to come hung in the air, unspoken, undeniable, and thrilling in its danger. Tonight, the tension had escalated. The dance continued, closer than ever, yet neither willing to name the fire simmering beneath the surface. The Apache lands held its breath, the shadows whispered secrets, and two solitary souls had crossed the line between curiosity and something far deeper, something neither dared yet to fully acknowledge. The night was thick with silvered shadows, the canyon alive with whispers of wind and the soft murmur of the river. Michaela moved carefully along the narrow path that led toward her hidden dwelling, her skirt brushing the rocks, her moccasins silent against the earth. She had grown accustomed to solitude, to the rhythm of the land, and yet tonight, that rhythm felt disrupted, as if the canyon itself had shifted to accommodate something unspoken. From above, Nokomis watched, crouched atop a ridge, his dark braid catching the faint moonlight. His muscles were taut, ready, yet he did not move forward too quickly. He had learned her patterns, observed her for weeks. And yet each encounter renewed the awe he felt for her strength, her independence, her unyielding presence. The slow burn that had built between them now pulsed with a dangerous intensity, a tension that neither could ignore. Michaela paused near a shallow stretch of river, her reflection broken by the gentle ripples. She sensed him again, the awareness that had become familiar, yet never less thrilling. Her muscles flexed subtly, tone visible even beneath the folds of her skirt, her arms steady and alert. She had faced threats before, yet the presence of Nokomi's brought a different kind of challenge, a mixture of curiosity, tension, and an unspoken acknowledgement of power. Nokomis descended from the ridge carefully, moving into the open yet keeping the shadows as his ally. The river's silvered surface reflected his figure, a solitary hunter stepping into the canyon's heart. Michaela's breath caught, not in fear, but in recognition. He was closer than ever, and yet his steps carried no aggression, only careful respect and a silent promise that he understood the boundaries she set. For long moments, they regarded one another across the glimmering water. The canyon seemed to hold its breath, the night waiting to see what would happen next. Michaela's muscles flexed under her loose top, the lines of her body illuminated by the moon, while Nokomis's chest rose and fell with controlled, deliberate breath, the shadows accentuating his lean, muscular form. Then, without a word, Nokomis moved just slightly closer, enough that the space between them was charged but not intrusive. Michaela's pulse quickened, every sense heightened. She could feel the pull, the silent gravity that drew them together, even as they maintained the delicate tension of distance. The canyon, the river, the wind, they all seemed to conspire to heighten the anticipation, to make this moment impossible to ignore. "Why do you watch me?" Michaela asked softly, her voice carrying over the water, low and deliberate, a mixture of challenge and curiosity. Nokomis paused, studying her, muscles flexed but controlled. "Because you are remarkable," he said simply. No elaboration, no embellishment, just truth, raw and unadorned. His words were not meant to flatter, but to acknowledge what he had seen, her strength, her skill, her independence, and the fire that burned quietly beneath the surface. Michaela's gaze softened for the briefest instant, though she did not allow herself to step closer. Her independence, her pride, demanded she remain cautious, yet the acknowledgement stoked a warmth she had not expected. Nokomis's presence was no longer merely an observation. It had become a recognition, a mirror of power, skill, and unspoken desire. The river flowed between them, silvered under the moon, reflecting their proximity yet not separating them. Both knew that this was more than chance. The slow burn that had started weeks ago, with shadows and moonlight, had led them here, to a place where desire and respect, tension and acknowledgement coexisted in fragile balance. Nokomis took one more deliberate step forward, just enough that the space was nearly gone. Michaela felt the magnetic pull, her muscles tensing instinctively, yet she did not step back. She was strong, independent, capable, and yet the silent gravity between them made her aware of something she had long denied, that she wanted to know him, to understand him, to match him in strength, skill, and spirit. The night air was thick with possibility, charged with the unspoken. The canyon seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting. Michaela and Nokomis stood there, two solitary forces, a heartbeat apart, each aware of the other's power and presence. Neither spoke again, for words were unnecessary. The tension, the slow burn, the electricity in the air conveyed everything. And then, as if the canyon itself had decided it, a gentle gust of wind swept over the river, ruffling Michaela's hair and skirt, carrying with it the scent of the earth, the river, and the unseen. Nokomis allowed himself a rare, slight smile, knowing that the moment had passed, but not ended. The dance between them would continue, slow and deliberate, each encounter building upon the last, until neither could deny the inevitable pull. Tonight, the canyon held its breath. Tomorrow, the slow burn would continue. And in the silvered shadows of the Apache lands, two souls had found each other, not through words, not through touch, but through the unspoken language of observation, respect, and a growing, dangerous desire. This was not the end. It was only the next step in a story that would unfold with patience, tension, and the promise of something far greater than either could yet name.
Subscribe to motivate me to write more. Comment what kind of story you want next. I read them all. See you guys in the next video. See ya!